Hello everyone, I'm Grzegorz Siemiończyk, I'm a journalist at Rzeczpospolita, and I will have the pleasure to moderate this debate. Let me start by introducing the participants. From the left, we have Mr. Ashim Malik Ndiaye, Director for IT and Communication in the Ministry of Economy of Senegal. Then we have Mr. André Xireb, Ambassador for Digital Affairs at the Office of the Permanent Secretary in Malta. Sorry if I misspell your names.
Fine, no.
Then we have Professor Ewa Niewiadomska-Szynkiewicz, who is the Director for Scientific Affairs at NASK Institute. Then we have Mr. Janusz Cieszyński, Secretary of State in the Chancellery of Prime Minister of Poland, responsible for the cyber security, and Mr. Nikodem Bończa-Tomaszewski, the CEO of Exatel. The title of the panel is Digital Sovereignty and Digital Solidarity, How to Act Together in the Face of New Technological Challenges and Global Cyber Threats. This is supposed to be a round table, although we're not sitting at the table. So I encourage you to engage in a discussion and comment on each other's remarks. Otherwise, I will have to ask my boring and very theoretical questions. So. The first question that I would like to ask you, and I would like all of you to respond to this question, is about what has changed in the cyberspace over the last decade or so that we started to speak about cyber sovereignty. Because the internet used to be a global phenomenon. It was actually one force behind the globalization. So what has changed now that we have to speak about cyber sovereignty? What are the new challenges and new threats in the cyberspace? Please.
Thank you very much. Cybersecurity in my country, Senegal, is a very important important matter. But why? But this is the appropriation of our top management team, our presidency, with the Senegal Emergent is the plan, it's the structural plan, economical plan. And we decide to launch a strategy from 2016 to 2022 as a cybersecurity strategy. In our strategy, we have the main importance is the protection of data and data. But data today have three aspects: economical and financial aspect, and right aspect, and financial protection and cyber protection aspect. That's why we consider that cybersecurity is the transversal question. That's why today in Senegal we put in first priority cybersecurity system in the field of government, in the field of private sector. All private sector need to decline the cybersecurity plan and SOC system for protection and something with against attack. This is the situation in my country. Cybersecurity is a very big preoccupation of government and of citizen. Simply, basically, for all citizens, cybersecurity is the preoccupation, is the first things that we are thinking to enhance and thinking to develop.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Xireb, how do you understand
Sure,
cyber sovereignty in your country? Do you treat it like on a national level or a European level?
I'm going to be my usual self and say both. No, but before that, I would also like to acknowledge that it is just like in Senegal, in Malta, it is very, very, very important, and I would say we can proudly say to have one of the European agencies that's most concerned with cybersecurity. I was talking to some colleagues yesterday about how quick our move to the cloud was and things like that. And there really is a lot of emphasis on making sure that we do things properly. But let me kind of answer also your previous question as well, if I may. What has changed in the last 10 years? Phones. I would say everything has come closer to our hearts. I now have a built-in spying device on me at all times, as does the minister here, as does pretty much everyone else. And 10 years ago, these things were not as powerful. They were not as the penetration was not as high, and this has changed the game completely. And it has caused us to start thinking about where our devices come from, where the supply chain comes from, the mistakes that Europe made decades ago to allow other continents to start manufacturing devices. And so it is a huge question, and it has had massive implications. And bringing it closer to home, I mean, in Malta we're approaching it from a local perspective in terms of making sure we have the capacity, making sure we have the right human capacity as well as everything else to roll out the latest technologies. But then on the European level, we want to make sure that we participate and make sure that on the European level we can grow our own technology, we can build our own technology, make sure that we know where it comes from, we make sure we know what there is in each of our devices.
Okay. Professor Niewiadomska-Szynkiewicz, the same question to you. How do you understand the cyber sovereignty?
Let me say from the perspective of scientists, because I'm information technology scientist. The internet and everything what's happened last few years changed the science. Because everything is going accelerated. The teachers have problems because they have to follow the changes. We have to change lectures, change everything, because students need something new, needs to be on the trend. And another problem, which I observed, is that another problem is that the network effects in the digital economy create unequal rules for monopoly giants and for small local companies. And of course we see, and I think that all of us aware that it may deepen the differences in development of various countries. And of course, there's a threat of weakness, that the weakness for weakness countries, that they can lose the sovereignty, the digital sovereignty. And I think that it is very difficult to eliminate this risk. But of course, the goal and the challenge for governments, for communities, for organizations is to mitigate this risk. We can observe that, for example, most data which is produced in the western parts is hosted in the United States. And we don't have any companies in top 20 list of global top branch in the world. So too much power, too much control is in few hands. So it's a problem, I think, for all of us, how to build this digital sovereignty now.
Thank you very much. Minister Cieszyński, the same question to you.
I think that the reason why cybersecurity and cyber sovereignty has become issues is that basically we have seen in a way which is understandable to anyone what are the consequences of not caring about cybersecurity and cyber sovereignty. And I think that many institutions have just abused their power, and the internet has, from something which was a place which originated in the world of science, which was meant to distribute information all around the world. It was for built to be good and make good things happen, and then in each situation like that, there's a point at which abusing the possibilities that you are given in this with these tools gives you very big advantages. So, so for instance, if you are manufacturing all these chips and just putting this small spy chip into components that you send outside of your country gives you opportunities to collect intelligence that you were not able to have before, then this it becomes more and more attractive option, and at some point someone will try to do it. And I think that this is why these things are on the agenda. I mean, I'm 100% sure that if we look back on literature or on science, there had to be scientists and futurologists and just thinkers, philosophers that said 30 years ago or 50 years ago that this is going to happen. But nobody reads those books and the science papers because they read Rzeczpospolita, and at that time, not now, no. At that time, so they read the newspaper, and I mean, if someone came to the newspaper 15 years ago and said that this will be a very big issue and that cyber attacks will ravage the society, the businesses, nobody would publish it. Maybe in the weekend edition where you need to fill out the pages with something interesting, but that's not news, but it's just something interesting to read, that an opinion. Yeah? So these opinions we're seeing have become facts, and these facts are extremely difficult to cope with. So I think that this is the reason why we see this as an issue, and that before nobody really, but that always happens with technology. I mean, at first you see only the upside. You only see what's good in it, and then as time goes by, the risks materialize. But like with any other thing, I mean, I remember when I was a child, they told me that my generation is doomed because we were watching too much TV. And they're saying, okay, so you have to. The parents were like, during the parents-teacher meetings, they're saying, what are we going to do? Our kids are watching all this TV, and we, they enter the room and they see, the cartoons, and they're saying, oh my God, that is so stupid, and it's the end of the world. There's no way that if he's watching cartoons today, he will, be able to do calculus in 5 years. Well, apparently that's not the truth, and I'm 100% sure that when my parents were growing up, there was something of that kind at the moment. So it's a natural way of life, and this is the it thing at the moment. And also, I think that when it comes to cyber sovereignty, I think that these peaceful times are sort of behind us in many ways. I mean, the recent situation with the border, who would have thought 5 years ago that this would be a real issue? Very unlikely that many people would say that it's real, and we've got very comfortable in this world order, and we were seeing that China is growing, the power of the United States is not as big as it was, but these are things that happen very slow, and then at some point the pipeline gets hacked. We have a shortage of chips right now, so you can't get a car because you can get it in half a year because there is no semiconductors. So when reality bites, this starts to be important, and it has bitten in so many ways in the recent months.
And I suppose you don't own a TV these days.
Oh, I do.
No,
And I use it for streaming online content.
Right, Mr. Bończa-Tomaszewski, the same question to you. How do you define cyber sovereignty, and why do we need it?
Well, I think that we should first define cyber sovereignty in terms not as an ability of state to protect itself, but as an ability of state to protect freedoms and security of citizens in cyberspace. And this is very important because right now I see a lot of discussion about cybersecurity especially. And these discussions are oriented toward securing the state and its administration and other state stakeholders. And we less think about security and freedom in the internet of our citizens. And I think that in the last decade, what happened is that we have great unbalance between stakeholders in the internet. Because we had basically three major stakeholders right now. States, especially superpowers. We have big corporations, internet corporation, who make huge profits and very successful businesses in the internet globally. And last but not least, we have people who are using the internet. Right now, I think that half of the world population is connected somehow to the internet every day. And we have the major unbalance between those powers. I think that especially superpowers and the large corporations, they have some sort of they started a process which we can compare to the colonization, and we see also a rivalry between China, especially, and United States, but not only of who will control the internet, and it's similar to the struggle of powers during colonial era, who will control the oceans. Because it gives you not hold over whole globe, but also hold over it gives you huge economical advantages. And I think that organizations such as UN and especially the small and medium-sized countries, they have to right now push the agenda toward restoring the balance. I'm not saying that superpowers are bad in the internet. You have to remember that Americans invented internet. And I'm not saying that corporations are bad in the internet totally, because this is natural place to make business. For small business, for big business, doesn't matter. But we have to restore the basic balance that this cyberspace is made to, just like Minister Cieszyński said, to make life better. And not to be a place to, for example, put more control over societies.
Well, actually, I said at the beginning that this is this discussion about cyber sovereignty is a new issue, but it's not that very new. The first time I encountered the term was actually in 2010 in The Economist, so it's already 11 years ago.
Which column?
In The Economist, the briefing.
So the leaders, yes?
Yes, the briefing. There's a broader report on the matter.
So when was the first report on climate change in The Economist? Probably even earlier.
Probably.
And only recently we're taking care of this. So, you know, we should read what's in The Economist, but what's going to happen in the next.
Well, back then it was framed as a kind of a conflict between the global superpowers. It was that the United States are worried about the surveillance by Russia. Russia is worried about the surveillance by the United States. Both United States and Russia are worried about the surveillance by China. And
it turned out that, you know, United States were spying on Angela Merkel. So
now we have Europe.
Interesting turn of events.
Yes, but now the worry is that if we try to prevent that, if we try to prevent that. This kind of surveillance and regain the control over the data generated in our countries. Doesn't this pose a risk that then the state will have too much control over the data and too much knowledge about their citizens? This is the risk that clearly materialized in China. That China is using its cyber sovereignty, and this is probably a very sovereign country in this respect, to somehow control their citizens. I know we all live in democratic countries, but how do we make sure that the citizens believe the data are not used for the wrong purposes by the state?
Actually, I have just one thing, because you said that China is going towards cyber sovereignty. Do you know, in these 5G infrastructure, when you take it apart, you know where the chip comes from? That's in the bottom of this?
Where?
United States or UK? That's the true cyber sovereignty. No, really.
But in the equipment, you mean in the
yes,
equipment?
there was this one of these mobile congresses in Barcelona, and one of the Chinese companies, it was unveiling its new technology, and you took it apart. At the bottom of this, I don't remember the name of the company, but it was it's an American or British chip in the heart of it. And that's what actually Trump did. He blocked the delivery of components to China, and it made this entire innovative business, a significant part of it, just stopped because it didn't have the components. So
Okay.
that's interesting because we many times we think that you know that there are countries that are able to make this whole technology from the bottom up.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy.
And we are trying to block Chinese companies, thinking that they are so potent.
No, I don't know who's trying to block the Chinese companies, but you know, you have to, when you look at it, you have to see that there's a lot of complicated relationships in these supply chains. We sometimes think that these supply chains go from the Far East to other countries, and the truth is they go like.
Mr. Ksirov, do you want to comment on this? Because
No, it's an interesting perspective, and I mean, in a sense, you said we all live in democratic countries, and I think that's kind of my rallying cry. Ultimately, there are some people I can, in principle, hold accountable in government, but it's not the same with. Insert the name of a big American tech giant here. I'd rather have someone who is at some level, who must at some level respond to the electorate in control of my data, because I can vote them out, I can hold them to account, I can take them to court. Whereas if it's a private operator, then I've got much less redress. And if it's a private operator halfway around the world that doesn't care about GDPR, I'm lost. So in some sense, yes, it could give states too much power, to get back to your point. But that's why it's a good thing to live in a democracy, because if the state gets too much power, then we can try and push back on that.
and
Maybe.
how does it look in Senegal?
No, I think that control. I think yes, control is a very necessity. It's a necessity. No, not dictator. If you put control in the national data, don't be control of citizen control. If citizen control is not democracy, no, sovereignty in data is a very important thing, but we cannot share our data outside of our country. But data, I say you in the beginning of my speech, that data have commercial aspect and financial aspect. Today, data analysis of data can be defined the market, can be defined the number of diabetics in our country, can be defined the number of number of population and similar. And sensible information don't be shared in the country. I'm not defending the position that GAFAM is, pirates, or GAFAM is the spreader who come in the country, want to occupy it also. We need in our politics and in our strategy, we need some, I don't think nationalism, no, we need to consider that data is the national things. No, data can be also be open, but if data not open, it will be not efficient. This is my position.
Well, according to Mr. David Gilmore, chief executive of DataFeeds, an analytical company, more than 100 countries have some sort of data sovereignty laws in place. And I'm wondering which countries of those do you think are the kind of a role model? Which examples should we try to copy in thinking about the rules of and the way we build cyber sovereignty? And I would like to address this question to Professor Niewiadomska-Szynkiewicz.
It's difficult to say. I think that the problem is that we have a classical problem to find the trade-off between the control of data and between the freedom. And it is really important. I think that it's impossible to find the global optimum in such a task. And we always have to make some decisions, which some of them will be good for some people, some others not for another. So, of course, there are some disciplines where some areas when we need the open data, for example, for science, which is really important because the development depends on it. And when we're talking especially about the artificial intelligence or data science, and when we want to support, for example, medicine, but of course all this data are sensitive data. So there is a really problem, I think, for governments, how about the decisions, what will be the best.
But what model of control over the data do you think is the most optimal? If for instance, if you have the choice between having some public entities who have the control over the data, or rather it should be the private companies, but somehow regulated with some standards set by the state.
It's of course it's difficult to say. I think that standards is one of the key options to solve the problem. Of course, global standards, which will be accepted for all the world or all the Europe, and there is a big effort in this. And but we can see that, as I remember, for example, when we take into account the ICO standard. There are a lot of activities in different countries. For example, the participants of Europe is more than 800. The participants in China is about 800. And the participant of United States is more than 600. So many activities of Europe, but we see that the internet is mainly controlled by United States. So we have standards. But of course, and we have very many activities, but of course, it doesn't decide about the position. So I think that maybe, in other words, what is, for example, the game, how to play the game for Europe? I think that be a gentleman, play to the rules, but play hard. So maybe the solution will be the certification and compliance assessment, which can keep the rules to the rules, but on the other side, it allow for competition. But there are a lot of problems with certifications too, because we can observe, for example, from our domestic example, that creating the certification body, the certification schemes, is not very easy and it takes time. And the problem, because we just created such certification scheme in Poland, it's accredited and it has accreditation. But we observe from this project we are developing that, for example, the problem is not in the lack of experts, in compliance assessors, but the lack is in business, in companies, which are not prepared to certify their products because they need more knowledge, education, especially when we consider the very strong certification norms, like standards, like common criteria. So I think that we need some steps in especially Europe, and especially we need the lower developed countries need some support, and they need support in training and promotion the certification in the countries, and we need lightweight schemes, lightweight, flexible schemes, which will be easier acceptable by our companies and manufacturers. And the second problem is that we need the schemes, the certification schemes, for fast increment certification of the products which are updated. Because now we start the certification from the beginning after any updating of the product. And we see that technology accelerated. The products have to be updated all the time. So all the time we're in the process of certification. It's impossible, it's too costly, too time-consuming.
This is an important point, that is, trying to somehow regulate the cyberspace might stifle competition, might stifle progress. And this is actually something that big tech companies complain about. They say that this profusion of regulatory regimes all over the world, it would limit the benefit of scale and raise their costs. And the question is, are there any risk to this stifling of competition? Because one could think that if there's if really the innovation in the internet slows down, then actually we'll have the effects contrary to those that we wanted to have. I mean that the current tech giants will stay giants, and there will be no competition for them because we stifled this innovation. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that I can think about any new innovations in internet since the arrival of smartphones, and so we have Google algorithms, search algorithms, which are excellent. We have smartphone. We have and all the innovations basically right now in the cyberspace, especially on the consumer level, are done on the user experience level. It's a competition who will gain better user experience to attract global internet users. And so it's for me, internet right now it's not a place for real technological innovation, at least for at least the last decade.
Okay, so you think that we don't have to care about. I mean, there is a force for monopolization, and no regulation of cyberspace. It won't create contenders for those big tech companies.
I think the problem is different. Problem is who will control the flow of the information. Just like we had I am going to use this because this is a great analogy with the colonial times, and who will control the passage over the seas. And this is the same. Who will control the information? And it's obvious for everybody that right now information or data about especially internet users it's easily converted into money, into economical power, into political power, and so on. So I think that right now we should focus. When you talk about freedom in the internet or who will control it or cyber sovereignty, we should control on the information and how is it managed. For example, you ask about you worried that, and lots of people worried that state. I often meet it as a CEO of Exatel, which is a telecommunication company owned by the state. And lots of people ask me, does the state in Poland have too much power and controls information? I am saying that in Poland, probably Facebook knows more about Polish citizens than the Polish state. And I think that here we have friends from Malta and Senegal. I think they have the same feeling. I think that to govern it well right now, there are two solutions. First of all, we have to push into regulations to create technologies which are secured by design. We see it in 5G technologies. We have right now a few open run projects which are concentrated on making environment for 5G technology to be secure by design. Because right now in mobile, for example, mobile phone technologies, we have 3G, 4G, which are very easy to disrupt, and not because they have certain flaws, but because the standard was created in this way that it's very easy to eavesdrop in 3 and 4G technologies, and so on and so on. I remember, we all remember the times when we had operation systems, we didn't have any antiviral protection or any sort of firewall. So it was unsecured by design. And so right now, this will not happen by itself. We need bodies like United Nations and we like European Union to push big tech companies and tech companies basically to create these solutions. And the second thing is that if we are talking about managing information, is we have to first ask what is this information be used for, and if we ask, when we will have the answer, when we will start ask this question, then we will solve the problem that, for example, we are worried the state will have too much information or a corporation and so on. Because right now we see a pattern in which everybody is collecting any information they could get their hands on. For example, for me, it's still I can't understand it. Why, for example, mobile phone companies collect information about localization of their clients, and they keep it for longer than one day, because I don't see any technological need for this, and this is completely unexplainable to me, and I don't understand why nobody asks a question about why we are doing this. Why do we need this information? So, and when we'll start to question what the information is for, then we will dissolve most of the worries about that this information can be used against our freedom, privacy, and so on and so on.
Actually, this data about mobility, I think it was used by the government during the pandemics. The one telling from telecoms. Sorry, Mr. Ksyrep was taking notes, so I want.
If I may, I mean, there's a couple of points to be had there. There is the argument of law enforcement. With keeping the information for longer than a day, but shorter than.
Yes, but you could, for example, install in your car a system which would totally control whether driver is breaking the rules on the road. We can do it very easily, but we don't do it for some reason.
But what I'm going to get at is. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the argument. I'm just saying that's the argument, and in fact, it kind of impinges very heavily on the secure by design issue, because so I'm from the quantum side of things, and one of the things one of the technologies we're trying to develop is a completely unhackable network. If you manage to hack that network, then the universe is broken. So really secure by the design of the universe, if you really want to go that far. But once that is done, once that technology finds its way into people's hands, then even law enforcement will be on the back foot, because at that point you cannot even eavesdrop for good reason. So there is a discussion to be, there is a balance to be had perhaps between secure by design to such an extent that it can't be broken into by anyone, and of course insecure by design, at which point it's broken into by everyone. So, but I don't know what the answer is, but it is an interesting question. And if I may go back to, I think it was you, the moderator, who raised this point of the tech companies saying that overregulation will increase their costs in the end. So what? I am not in the business of having them make more profit. I am in the business of making sure our citizens are served better. So honestly, I mean, for me, this is not an argument which I would even entertain. I understand it's an argument that they make. I understand they have the power to make that argument, but it's not an argument which I think we, as a bloc, as an EU, should ever entertain.
So. On our yesterday's panel, we were talking. There was Marta from Google, and she said that we are paying all taxes that are required by the law, which in Poland meant 12 million zloty, which is 3 million euros, 2.5. Yeah. So
that's what they make in 1 hour? I don't even know what am I saying.
Let me make one remark about your the security by design problem, because you say, and this is a lot of government officials, they say, okay, but we need some sort of a backdoor into, so this not, it's to the certain extent secure by design idea, but I think that answer to it is that government does not have a key to every household in the country, and doesn't need it. And to enter somebody's home, they need a special regulations. So I think that if we are going to make simple analogies to the real world, then we will find a lot of answers, because I think that the mindset, we have to remember that internet, or basically the cyberspace, in the hands of the state, which has regulatory mindset that they want to control, is a great control tool. I think that we can observe it in China. It's like communism on the turbo power using cyber. It's like Stalin. It would be great tool for him. He would be more cyberspace
2.0, right?
Yes. It would be like for Stalin the possibilities of control using internet is like, it would be like, wow, he would say. I was born too soon, but when the state has is more working in the paradigm of that he's in the service of the citizens, and that he has to benefit the citizens and to protect their freedoms, the situation is changing, and we don't have these worries. Because when you say, okay, secure by design, but we want to have a backdoor, then I say, but if you look at the criminals, at least in Poland, it's just a small fraction of the society. So why do control everybody?
No, I agree with you. Can I just finish off two very small points?
Go ahead.
One, I really like the analogy with maybe not colonization as much, but colonialism, as much. But the idea of finding a similar analogy, we could look at the law of the seas. We're not free to do whatever we want to do in the seabed, even though it doesn't belong to anyone. And, cyberspace doesn't belong to anyone. And, similar philosophies should apply to safeguarding how things flow, what is fair game, and so on and so forth. So maybe we can take inspiration from there.
But you should remember that during colonial times, the sea didn't belong to anyone. It was a British saying, and the British stated it when they had full control. And Malta was a part of this control system. And then United States took over. So it's like, it's like Peter Thiel once said that if the capitalist is saying about freedom of trade, it means that he established monopoly.
And last thing, regulation does not always stifle innovation. If you're smart about how you regulate, you allow for feedback loops, you allow for the regulation to evolve. It doesn't stifle innovation, and it's a general thing. I mean, we discussed this yesterday in a panel. COVID was a massive shock to our system, and but most of our economies didn't collapse. People pivoted, businesses pivoted, and you can see that as an additional constraint came along, and people innovated. So constraints can actually be good for innovation. Sometimes we have no choice. But
yeah, that is true. But also, with the regulations. I think that COVID actually proved where the whole process of the whole legislative process was like on steroids. So you had a feedback loop. So you did this, and then a week later you would change it because and this normally doesn't happen. So you have the regulatory process takes a year. And so you give some signals to the market, you say, I'm going to do this, and then you put the bill forward, and the entire market concentrates of just, we don't want anything, and then we don't want this. So we are actually, cooperating closely with Chairman Bończa-Tomaszewski at the moment on a project where we have many entities that are interested in certain elements of this regulation, and it's a difficult process because you have all these things that you have to take care of, and once we're gonna pass it, I'm not touching it for like 10 more years. No way, because I mean, because no one will want to. So this is actually one thing about regulation and innovation. I think is the difference is that innovation is like in this iterative process, constant changes. There's this great clip about innovations. It's called "Lego car goes over books."
Okay.
You can look it up. It has 50 million views on YouTube, and you see that there's how the car changes. There's one book, and then there's a growing stack of books, and you see how the car changes to go through. And very interesting because it shows that it tries, doesn't go, so you change something, and with legislation it doesn't work that way because. It goes to Parliament, makes some amendments, vote, and the next time you go at it will be in 1 year. So this is the real issue, and
not enough flexibility in.
Yes, but on the other hand, when we talk to businesses, they want only one thing. They want stability, and they say that even with this process being, in my opinion, at some points not agile enough. I think that any business person you would ask, he would say, if there's one thing I would like in legislation, is just stop all legislation for 5 years, so we have this framework that we have now, and we will operate in this field that we know, because we don't want it changing. So this is a very difficult task because you have to be an innovative legislator. And
we have about 15 minutes before we finish, and I have 2 more threads to.
Sorry, I have.
You have to.
Yeah, I have to
get
go
away.
because I have to be somewhere at
6.
6. Yes, sorry.
All right.
So thank you very much for the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I.
There is one more trade-off when thinking about the big tech companies and trying to regain some power from them, because they surely have the benefits of scale, and when you have more fragmentation of the market, more fragmentation of the control over the data is more fragmented. The question is whether you actually decrease the safety of the system, because those big companies, they have the resources to build the security systems over the data, and when you fragment the system of control over the data, then you run the risks that maybe it will be easier to hack. Professor, this may be the question to you.
I think that always the preventing distributed system is much more challenge than centralized one. But on the other side, we see, for example, the cloud computing. So we have distributed systems, and I think that it is only one way to distribute, because, for example, the idea of grid computing appeared when the massive data from, for example, CERN and developed by physicians from physics, from science, from mathematics, had to be collected. And it was impossible to collect them in one point. So I think the future for data processing is a distributed data. And of course, it's difficult to prevent the security. But now I think that we have private cloud, so it is rather idea to how to prevent. But we will see what will happen when, for example, quantum computing appeared, because we have to see in the future changes are so fast, so the quantum computing can change the mining of security. And we have to be prepared. So a lot of initiatives of Europe and in our country too, different projects concerned with quantum computing, with quantum cryptography, and we have to think about another protection.
But I think that in your questions, because it was also in the previous questions, there is a notion that the big tech companies are smarter than the rest of the world. And this is simply not true, especially if we talk about cybersecurity. Most cybersecurity solutions, especially on the high architectural level, are created, for example, by the open source community. When we talk about Linux operation system, which is much safer than Windows, it was created by one man, and putting the internet as open source. I can also show you examples of cybersecurity solutions which were also created by open source communities or by the small companies. So it's not that they are inherently smarter than the rest of the world. So it's. So I would say no.
If I may, I would add actually one thing to that, which is you have a single point of failure. It's if you have a company that runs our infrastructure, one company that runs our email infrastructure, for example, and it fails or is brought down, that brings everything down with it. Whereas if it's more distributive, it's much harder for anyone to, nefariously or not, bring it down. So I would say that from a cybersecurity perspective, perhaps somewhere in between is always better than fully distributed or fully centralized.
And that's why I called it a trade-off. Another topic that I would like to discuss is the issue, kind of an ethical issue maybe, because the Freedom House, in its freedom ranking, it also ranks countries according to the internet freedom. And the ranking shows that in most countries, no matter if they're currently ranked as free, partly free, or not free, the score has been declining recently. And I think it can be attributed to this sovereignty trend, that somehow there is more censorship, maybe less free access for foreign players, and this in turn leads these outcomes. So I'm wondering whether this internet freedom, is it a value worth cherishing, or maybe it can be sacrificed for more safety? Where would you put the balance here? And let's start from the left.
Okay. Free, internet free, it's a good concept. No, I think that they say that about security by design is a very difficult approach. No, it's a good approach, no, it's very difficult. No, I think today the main things that we have to adopt is the collaboration. I think regulation have to go with collaboration aspect, collaborative regulation. But and also we have to encourage the open source solution for create the autonomy of countries from without dependency of big tech enterprises. We have to develop or to stimulate innovation in the young people and the children or the young people, but we have to start with reform of curricula. We need the academy can play a big role in this process. But if we do that every time in our countries, in low developing countries, we have diktat from big tech enterprise.
So there is no actually well, it's a false alternative to speak about freedom on the one hand and security on the other hand. It can go in hand in hand.
Freedom. We need freedom in every domain. Freedom is a basic things. Freedom. If you don't do that, if you don't go free, you can someone say a colonialism. We go to I don't know in English. No, we go to accept every time diktat from the big countries, the big technology. That's why main things it's going free. No, free internet. It's also a very complicated things.
Okay, thank you very much. And now the last question. One aspect of cyber sovereignty which we haven't discussed so far is the drive towards central bank digital currencies. The central banks are worried that if they fail to provide the digital versions of their own currencies, then those currencies will be pushed out by the international ones, private ones. Is it already time to create central bank digital currencies, and why are we not discussing this in Poland? This is the question to you.
I don't know why we are not discussing it in Poland, but basically I think the intention is like, on one hand, it's like you said, the fear that private internet currencies, digital currencies will take over, and the users will naturally gravitate toward them. But on the other hand, it would make tax collecting much more easier using digital currencies. But I think that within next decade it will be a very important topic, and that most central banks will go very strongly toward the digitizing all the currencies in the world, which would create, of course, much more economic challenges for the world economy, which are, I think, mostly unimaginable at this level.
Mr. Ksyrov, the same question to you. I know that the European Central Bank actually is
I'm going to have to be careful. No,
Mm.
I don't think that the threat from these private digital currencies is a big one. I mean, I am of the opinion that this will pass, and that they are not a credible alternative to what we have at the moment for several reasons. I'm happy to discuss this further. I know we're out of time, but that is my foundation. So I would approach this from a different perspective, and it does kind of play with the issue of sovereignty quite a bit, in the sense that if I'm talking about physical currency, or euro notes, then I have two options. I have many options. I have at least two options. One of which is put the money in a bank, not for the interest or anything, just store it in the bank. The other is store it in my wallet. And I have those two options. I can have someone safeguard my currency. I can have my own safeguards. I can decide to give you the money, and I can decide to do that via a bank. I have the choice. Whereas when it comes to, if you think about it, when it comes to doing things electronically, we just don't have the choice. There's no way for me to store a euro note electronically and give it to you.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just the ECB and other central banks realizing that us citizens want to have the option to store our own money digitally and be able to pay digitally in the same way that we do with currency. But honestly, I'm being very honest here, for me there's absolutely almost no overlap between that concept and the concept of Bitcoin and all these other currencies.
Yes, but
this is not about the Bitcoin, it's about the so-called stable coins, digital currencies linked to the hard currencies.
Yes, because some economists say that we already have a state electronic currency because most of the cash flow is within the electronic systems. But I think that when I was thinking about electronic currency, it would be currencies in which you could not produce more than algorithms allows you. So it's not like that we have a COVID, so central bank is just printing in euros or American Federal Reserve. But we have some sort of a gold standard for the digital gold standard. And of course, the Bitcoin is like on the unhealthy side of this because it demands lots of energy to create it, which is like completely absurd, but it works somehow. So we would have to find something smarter, but it's like some sort of question about who is going to make the decisions in the future, whether the algorithm or some sort of central bank AI, or is this going to be a political question that let's print more money because we have a situation which is...
So my perspective is exactly that the system that we have at the moment works well enough, except for the fact that I still have to interface with the physical world to put money in my wallet. And that's something I cannot do without. I cannot get around at the moment. Whereas if there is a central bank digital currency which is issued and it's cryptographically certified with my identity card or something, I don't know, then I would be able to do away with the physical interface completely. But from the point of view of monetary decisions, I'm actually quite happy with the present system, and I honestly don't think it's in danger of collapsing and or changing drastically anytime soon. And so central banks do have the potential to print money, but they don't do it, ridiculously. I would argue.
I'm not an economist, so but
no, me neither. I just rely on what people tell me. Ultimately, if we give up decisions to AIs or algorithms, AIs and algorithms all have bugs. They're all based on flawed data at the end of the day. So we will always have to fall back on human decisions, which we do at the moment anyway. So we'll probably end up in the same situation we are at the moment. But the real missing thing for me is the fact that there is no analogy of an electronic wallet with euros in it that is not privately held by some tech company, that is cryptographically secured and held secure by the root certificates on my government service, for example. That for me, that doesn't exist, and that for me is a big missing thing. And in my understanding, this is where the central banks seem to be going. But this is my understanding. I have very strong opinions about this.
Hey, thank you very much. We'll stop here. Thank you for joining the debate, and thank you for your responses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.